Hello, how's it going? Welcome to hopefully a really good video about Dark and Darker. It's me, Cranberry. How's it going? Hopefully you're doing well. Today, not really, there's going to be gameplay in the background here, I suppose, but this isn't really a Dark and Darker Let's Play video here. Just a video talking about, just something that I think is pretty interesting. The next playtest. If you didn't know, it's sometime mid-April. It's currently scheduled for. I think it's from like the 14th to the 19th, if I remember correctly. That's just off the top, though. Not exactly sure when it is, but mid-April is the next Dark and Darker playtest, and I'm very excited for it. You probably are as well, especially if you're watching this video. And I just wanted to talk about things that I'm hoping to see in the next playtest. It's like a sort of like a half wish list, half balance changes I want to see in the next playtest. One thing I want to talk about though before we get diving into it too much is the general Dark and Darker design doctrine. I haven't seen it literally anywhere, but I could have sworn in one of the dev interviews they talked about how they are heavily inspired by Dungeons and Dragons. It's pretty obvious if you didn't realize based on the name, Dark and Darker, Dungeons and Dragons, right? Makes sense. But I think an important part of their design doctrine is that they want the classes to at least feel somewhat similar to their counterparts in Dungeons and Dragons. I don't know about specifically 5th edition, but I think 5th edition is what they're going for there with that. So, with that in mind, I want to talk about how to not necessarily get closer to Dungeons and Dragons, but I want to talk about just things that I would think would be maybe cool changes, just that are both maybe better for gameplay while also being in line with that design philosophy, right? So, starting off, one thing that really bothers me that I don't know how other people really feel about this. I don't see it discussed too often. I don't like the no armor meta, which is not really the meta. When you get to like high end equipment, most people are using gear with stats that are beneficial. Having gear with beneficial stats for you will always be better than not using gear, basically. But I think it's very strange how if you don't have gear with modifiers that are specifically good for what your character does, it's oftentimes just better to not use any equipment whatsoever. I'm sure you've seen it, wizards running around naked, hurling fireballs and stuff like that. It's not that uncommon. I find it weird that a lot of equipment in this game gives you movement speed penalties when it probably shouldn't, right? Wearing a robe as a wizard should not move you down slow you down so much that it's not worth wearing. That has always felt kind of weird to me, and a lot of characters have this sort of trade-off where wearing clothing is just not good for them. The Barbarian has like a built-in perk around it, to be shirtless, so it kind of makes sense there design-wise. I kind of like that perk, actually. I think it's kind of neat. But a lot of other characters are running around shirtless, and it's very weird, and I don't like it. One thing I like to see in general in the game is just either a huge reduction or just maybe a removal entirely of movement speed penalties for most light or all light and then most medium weight gear. I don't know where you want to make the cutoff exactly at that. And then even with heavier gear, I'd like to see a bit of a cutoff as well for some of that movement speed penalty. I think it's very strange how you have gear that is specifically made for, the fighter and cleric, right? You have like heavy armor. You have proficiency for that gear, and then you wear that gear and it still weighs you down a ton. That seems weird to me. I don't like it that much. And again, going back to that D&D design doctrine, there are probably like generally the way D&D works is that if you're wearing very heavy armor, but it's armor you're allowed to wear, it will make you less stealthy, but overall your character still moves at the same speed as normal, right? There's probably some exceptions to that. I usually don't play very heavily armored characters in D&D, but that's a thing, right? And then also there'll be armors that modify your maximum AC generated by dexterity. If you understand what that means, great. If you don't, basically it makes it harder to dodge but easier to actually tank attacks. That's the idea of heavy armor in Dungeons and Dragons, and I would like that to be more in line with the game. I don't want my fighter to be so damn slow that when he's wearing heavy armor, he's worthless in a fight once his sprint is on cooldown. I don't like that. I know there's a perk for reducing the penalty for armor. That perk sucks. It's not that good. You need so much heavy armor, and the actual amount of move speed you get from it is not even that significant anyway, then. I just think it's very strange. I don't like it. I would love to see some changes in that sense. Would appreciate that very much. Now, moving on, it's the thing that everyone's hoping for that's going to be in the next playtest. I'm hoping it's going to be here, the Bard. Everyone's excited for Bard. Everyone wants Bard, I'm sure. I'm excited for it. And I love Bards in pretty much every video game I've ever been in. If a game has a Bard, I will play it. I fucking played Genshin Impact because I saw that little twink boy Bard, and I was like, I can get that guy. And then I found out I couldn't get that guy. Apparently, the way that game works, whatever. We don't have to get into it. What I'm saying is, I love Bards in every game that I play them in. Big fan of Bards, and I was very excited to hear that this game would have one. But interesting thing here, right? How does a Bard work in Dark and Darker, right? We already have a couple of characters that play more of a support role. You have wizards who can do like a hybrid support slash blaster role. They do that pretty well. And then you have clerics who tend to go a little bit harder in the paint on the support role, but they can also wade into melee as well a little bit. They're not necessarily great at it, but they're not terrible at it, right? So where does Bard fit into this, right? Because I think we don't really want redundancies in this game, right? We want every character to play uniquely and do well. But again, we also have this Dungeons and Dragons design doctrine here, right? That we're trying to follow. If you don't know, in Dungeons and Dragons, Bards are what you would call a full caster. They have spells that go from level 1 spells to level 9 spells, and as you level up, you progressively get stronger and stronger spells, right? And the reason why they're called full casters, there's a lot of characters that are only called that are half casters, that only have spells that go from levels like 1 to 5, right? Rangers actually are a half caster. In Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition, Rangers are a half caster. So there's no rule saying that a character in this game has to cast spells if it also casts them in D&D, and I'm fine with that. I don't need Rangers to have spells in this game. And honestly, even though Bards are a full caster, I don't even know if I necessarily want them to have spells in this game either. I see Bards functioning in one of two ways in Dark and Darker. I can see them being a caster. I don't hate them being a caster, right? But the question is, how do you make them a caster? If you look at, again, Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition, one of the main issues with Bards is that they have a huge amount of spell overlap with other casters in the game. A huge amount. And it's a little tricky to find unique spells. I think I looked it up before this. I think Bards in total have 3 unique spells that only they can learn in all of 5th edition. If you go to earlier editions of D&D, probably one of the more popular ones besides 5th edition is 3.5. It's a much bigger spell list, but a lot of those spells are also in 5th edition, and in 5th edition, they've been given to other casters as well. So there's very few unique spells to draw from for Bards to use that give them their own identity. So that's something that I don't love about Bards as a spellcaster, but there's some pretty cool spells still. You have Otto's Irresistible Dance, which is technically a wizard spell in 5th edition as well, but it does feel more like a bard spell, so I'm pretty cool with that one. I can see it being implemented as sort of like a charm effect in D&D. Irresistible Dance just forces a person to dance. Very cool. Makes them vulnerable to being attacked, whatever. I can see it in Dark and Darker acting as more of a stun effect, something along those lines. And you get the added bonus, especially if the developers want to put this in, of maybe, I don't know, getting like a character to fucking start flossing, right? That'd be hilarious, right? If Ninja Fortnite's up in there, not seeing enough movement, boom, you hit him with a spell, you start seeing enough movement. It'd be pretty cool. It'd be very strong, probably too strong, honestly. Unless it was like a very short period of time. I don't know. But it's a cool idea. Another spell that I think would be pretty cool in the Bard's arsenal is Fairy Fire, which, again, not a Bard exclusive spell. Again, it's a bit of an issue. Not a Bard exclusive spell. Druids also have access to it in 5th edition, but I think thematically makes sense for a Bard to have. And if Druids do ever exist in Dark and Darker, I can see them also not being a caster. I can see a Druid in Dark and Darker focusing more on the shape-shifting aspect of it and less on the casting aspect. So I'd be pretty okay with Bards having access to Fairy Fire. If you don't know, Fairy Fire is just kind of like a weird magical light explosion, pretty much, that in Dark and Darker, I can see it as a stealth remover, right? Be pretty cool. B, a flashbang, maybe a little annoying. Maybe people don't want a flashbang in this game. Could be kind of funny. I don't know. But it could also in D&D, it tends to outline the targets it hits, right? So just even if they're not invisible, it's just nice to have like enemies outlined for you. Makes them a little bit easier to hit, especially if they're trying to hide in the dark. So I think that'd be a pretty cool spell option for Bards to have. Beyond that, the problem is Bards are traditionally known for these sort of like charm effects, these sort of like utility charm effects in Dungeons and Dragons, where they'll go up to someone and they'll cast an enchantment on them that makes the person easier to suggest to. Literally, the spell's called suggestion, and where you can like sort of be like, hey, these aren't the droids you're looking for type Jedi mind tricks. That doesn't translate well to Dark and Darker, so that's hard to do. I don't know how you would do that. Maybe you could have it could be like an AI spell where you could temporarily put an AI on your side and have them fight for you for a bit. That'd be kind of a way to do that, maybe, but it's a little outside the realm of what I'd like to see. Mainly because spells that focus exclusively on AI are kind of stinky. I don't love them very much. So, anyway. Besides that, also, there's a lot of sound-based magic that exists in Dungeons and Dragons that Bards could use. But again, I don't know. They're not Bard specific usually. Something like Thunderwave, where you just do like a big AoE sound wave burst around you. It's kind of Bardy, but it's also like a lot of other casters can use it too, I think. So it's not great. They do have access to a spell called Dissonant Whispers as well, which is a pretty it is one of the 3 Bard exclusive spells. It is a very good spell, but again, it's like this weird charm effect where it causes someone to run away from you if they get hit by it, basically. Hard. This is why I don't like Bards as a caster in this game, because it's hard to make them feel like a Bard very well. There's some things you can do, and I'm not opposed to having maybe overlap in the spell list. Wizards have the haste spell, which is a Bard spell as well. There's a lot of overlap here. A lot of characters share spells in Dungeons and Dragons, and it wouldn't be that crazy for Bards to have access to a couple of the spells that Wizards have. In Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition, Bards actually have a unique ability called Magical Secrets, where as they get stronger, they can just sort of take spells from any caster in the game and start adding them to the spell list, basically. I can have, I'll take a cleric spell over here and a ranger spell over there and stuff like that. They can do things like that. So it's not that bad of an idea to have some overlap there. They can maybe take a spell from any other caster in the game, which would be kind of cool. Balance-wise, might be a little tricky, though. I don't know. It would be neat, though. Anyway, that's the caster route. If we don't go with casters, how do we want Bards to work? I didn't talk about it yet, but obviously Bards are going to have an instrument. This does mean that there's going to be like an instrument weapon type most likely in the game, although I could see it being in the utility slot, similar to how a pickaxe does. I don't like that, though. I would prefer it being in the weapon slot because it feels like it's important. and I don't know. I just want it to be a weapon slot item. But they need one. They need a lute. I don't know what other instruments you want to put in there. Maybe a pan flute, whatever, right? But Bards need to have instruments in this game. If they don't, what the hell is happening, right? That's a has to be from the get go. They have to have instruments, right? So on one hand, their instruments could be a spell focus, similar to how spell books and magic staffs act and things like that in the crystal ball. They can be a spell focus where you just use the instrument to cast your spells instead. I don't hate that. I don't necessarily love it either, because I feel like if you go the other route and make Bards a non-caster in this game, it opens up a lot of cool design ideas where maybe your loot, right? If you hold down left click, your guy plays music, and then that maybe the instrument specifically does a certain effect, right? Let's say, for example, if it's a lute, your party, while you're left clicking, while you're strumming, I don't know, they do 20% increased damage. I don't have an exact number set for this, obviously. I'm not making this damn game, but something like that would be pretty cool, where you specific instruments will have unique effects to them, maybe, and then in addition to that, you can have the bard's passives focus on doing things while you're playing an instrument as well. So let's say, for example, you are, lute does 20% damage to everyone who can hear it, right? Or they deal 20% extra damage, right? When you're playing it. I could also see maybe a passive perk where, allies who can hear your music also have their cooldowns come off cooldown at twice the rate, right? Like a cooldown reduction perk. Things of that nature. It opens up a lot of design space for what the bards can do, and I think it just makes more sense in general. There's a lot of things you can do with this as well, right? And they need to be strong effects, because your character is effectively out of commission, right? When a cleric puts a buff on a character, you can put the buff on someone, and then you can hit someone with your mace afterwards. You can maybe see an argument for, bards can maybe also attack with their instruments. I don't love that. I don't know if you've ever seen a guitar. Yeah, you can beat someone with a guitar, but you shouldn't. Not a good idea. You don't hit people with your instruments. They're gonna break, and I don't like the idea of them being used as an improvised bludgeon. But maybe, I don't know. I wouldn't be entirely opposed to it, but I don't like the idea of it. I like the idea more so of this support character sitting in the back and then playing their guitar and then doing things like that to buff their party. In addition to that, bards have a mechanic called Bardic Inspiration, where they usually just pick an ally, put inspiration on them, and then in Dungeons and Dragons, they can, at any point over the next 10 minutes or so ish, they can choose to activate this little pocket buff, and they get to add an extra +4 to their next hit or whatever, right? And they can kind of pick and choose when to use this very strategic limited resource buff. Not really a thing you can implement in this game, so I like maybe Bardic Inspiration being an active skill that bards have, where you can put a rupture style effect on someone's next attack. Not literally rupture where it does a bleed, but that same idea where their next attack gets a bonus to it, right? I think it'd be pretty cool. Whether or not it's actually good, I don't know, but I like that as an idea in general. I think that'd be a pretty good option for an active skill for the bard, whether or not they're a caster or not, right? That's whether they're a caster or whether they're this sort of instrument support class that generates maybe some sort of AoE field around them of buffing. Either way, inspiration being an applied on next attack buff, I like as well. That feels more on theme with what the bard does in Dungeons and Dragons. Like that quite a bit. And besides that, what else can you do with bard in this game? What is going to be their martial proficiency? That's an important thing too. What are bards going to actually be able to use as far as weapons besides instruments? Again, I don't like the idea of a bard being able to hit someone with a lute. Maybe it'll be a thing. I wouldn't be shocked about it. I feel like people, like the idea of hitting someone with a guitar. I don't like it, but whatever. But in Dungeons and Dragons, bards, not the most versatile weapon set, but not nothing. They do have access to long swords, which in this game is more equivalent to an arming sword. But they have access to that, rapiers, short swords, bows, things of that nature, right? So it makes sense for bards to have some melee weapons. I don't like them having a bow, personally. I don't know. If the rogue doesn't get a bow, I don't think Bard should get a bow. I'll talk about that more actually later too when we talk about the rogue. But I don't think that Bard should have access to a ranged weapon like that. But it wouldn't be that crazy if they did either. Or maybe a crossbow. I mean, they have crossbow proficiency as well. Wouldn't be the weirdest thing ever. Anyway. One more thing. I almost forgot about it. Song of Rest is a mechanic in Dungeons and Dragons where whenever you are taking a short rest, which is an in-game mechanic in D&D where you try to, heal a little bit in between fights, basically, right? Song of Rest is an ability bards have, and it makes sense to me that maybe if your bard is with you at a campfire, you maybe heal a little bit more. It's just a fun little thing. maybe a good passive idea for bards. Wouldn't even necessarily be that good, but I don't hate it. I don't hate it as a perk idea. Why not, right? Anyway, moving on. Moving on here. I want to talk a little bit about rogues. I want to talk a lot about rogues, honestly. I think most people will agree, and maybe not everyone, I think most people will agree that rogues currently are the weakest character in the game. Not by a huge degree, but by a notable degree. I think we can all agree that rogues are tough. I talked about this in my recent tier list video. But they're just not they're not in a good place, mainly because the other martial characters will absolutely wipe the floor with you in melee combat, even if you get the jump on them. If you're a rogue and you ambush a barbarian, right? You stab them in the back 2 or 3 times, they turn around with their big axe and they hit you in the head and you die. It sucks, but it happens. And I'm not even necessarily opposed to the barbarian being able to kill you in a single hit, right? People talk about like the one-shot meta a lot in the game. I don't know if it's a good or a bad thing. I think people will say it's a bad thing a lot of the times. I don't know. I feel like it's not that crazy if a barbarian takes a gigantic axe and hits you in the face, that maybe if you're a rogue you die. I don't know if that's a good or bad thing, right? But I do know that it's a bad thing that the rogue cannot kill anyone in the damn game right now, except for like rangers and wizards sometimes, right? They're too underpowered, and I think the correct place for rogues to be is if a rogue ambushes a player, they should probably win that fight most times, right? They're a character that's trying to reward you for being sneaky, right? And if you succeed in being sneaky, you should get a big reward out of it. And right now, your reward is usually death. It's usually not good. So I don't like it. I would like the backstab passive that rogues have to be way higher damage. I don't know where the correct damage number is for it, but 30% is just like criminally low. Unbelievably low. It should be a lot higher. Maybe it should be a 2 times multiplier, which I think I don't know, now I'm like a fake gamer. Are headshots 1.5 times multiplier, or are they 2 times? I've heard both. I'm not sure which they are. But either way, I think backstab should be at least equivalent to headshots, and maybe the way you balance that is you make it so that way it doesn't apply to headshot attacks. So that way if you're hitting them in the back of the head or if you're hitting them in the back, it's the same damage, but it's that same like headshot multiplier, right? That's what I would like. I would like that a lot. Or maybe even more. I don't know what the number is. I don't know where the sweet spot is, but goddamn, rogues should kill you if they sneak up behind you and get the first hit. That's where I'd like them to be. Also, besides that, they have a lot of like these meme abilities that I don't love very much. Pickpocketing, very funny. I'd rather have a real skill there in that place instead. And then hidden pockets. The problem with hidden pockets as an ability is not that it's necessarily weak, especially if you're trying to be stealthy, right? I don't know about you. 90% of the players that I spot are initially because I see potions on their belt. Probably, roughly. I don't know the exact number right there. But like, and I'm sure you know it as well. Seeing potions is an extremely easy way to identify a player as opposed to like a skeleton off in the distance or like a skeleton mage or whatever and things like that, right? It's very easy to see a potion and go, person. So it makes sense for rogues to be able to hide those potions. I don't know if you know this though. You can just keep the potions in your inventory instead of on your belt. It's a little less convenient to use them, but not that big of a deal. Not that huge of a debuff, right? So I don't like that as a perk. And also skills like that, it's very hard to tell how impactful they actually are to you, right? You can't tell how many people don't see you because you have hidden pockets. It's hard. It's hard to know. It's hard to quantify how strong the ability is. It could be the strongest ability in the game, and like just no one would know because it's hard to evaluate, right? So I would just prefer more straightforward buff perks that are not silly. Dagger Expert as well. I forget that is the exact name of it, but adding a 5% increase to a weapon that does 20 damage. I don't know if you've done the math on this. That's a 1 damage increase. That is not a good perk. Don't love that. there's definitely better perks you can give the rogue. Maybe a flat damage instead of a percent damage there or something like that. I don't know. But yeah. Also, like I said it before, little spoiler here, bows. Would it be so insane if rogues had access to a bow? I know you're maybe thinking at first here, would it be too strong to apply poison and or rupture on a ranged weapon? I don't think so. Maybe only give them the survival bow. It seems to be kind of taking the place of like a short bow in this game, right? Maybe give them only access to a survival bow, and like that doesn't feel that broken to me, honestly. I don't know. Maybe I'm the crazy one here, but again, going back to the Dungeons and Dragons design doctrine, rogues can use bows. They can use short bows. They can use crossbows. They can use hand crossbows. They can do all these things with ranged weapons. I see no reason for the rogue's only ranged option in this game to be throwing knives. It's a little weird to me. So I would like to see. I think that would be honestly not even be like, it'd probably be like pretty balanced. I feel like, right, giving the rogue and the ability to kind of pepper people with these like low damage projectiles that also add dots. It just kind of makes sense to me. But I don't know. Maybe it'd be too strong. I don't know. Another idea I had for an ability is maybe some sort of CC effect. I have two iterations of this. One as an active skill. I'm calling it tendon cut for now. I don't know what you can work on a better name for this, right? But an active skill where if you hit someone with your attack, probably for this one it makes sense as a melee attack because you don't really disable people with ranged weapons very often. But an active skill where you hit someone and their movement speed is reduced by like 80% for, I don't know the exact correct time for this or the exact numbers for this, right? Where it's balanced. But I like the idea of the rogue being able to start an ambush by hitting someone and reducing their movement speed so that way they can disengage and allow their other melee characters to engage with a big advantage. That makes a lot of sense to me as like a skill idea. What is it? Weak point? I forget the name of the other rogue ability now. That one, it's not terrible. I don't like it that much. And I feel like, disabling someone's movement is far more debilitating than reducing their armor rating. So, I don't know. I think that would be more a clear-cut, better design idea. And the alternate version of this, instead of it being an active skill, I like the idea of it being maybe a passive skill where melee attacks specifically to the legs can cause some sort of maybe stacking movement speed debuff. So if you hit them like 2 or 3 times in the legs, they get like a slow. And then same idea, right? Where you stab them in the legs and then you disengage and then you let your other melee characters come in and finish them off. That would be pretty cool, I think. Maybe too strong. I don't know. This is a playtest, right? Let's try things out. I think it'd be pretty cool. Yeah, I don't know. Moving on to Clerics here. I don't want to change the Clerics at all. I think Clerics are hands down the strongest character in the game for 3v3. And I'm okay with that. I actually like the way they play. I think they're pretty good. We'll see if Bard being another supporting character causes any shakeup here. But I think Clerics provide a unique and powerful effect that it's not mandatory, but it's really nice to have. And they're strong. And I don't want to penalize support players. Thank your supports. It's a nice thing to do, and I don't know why. My general, just outside of this, my general design philosophy in general should be to make your best effort to buff weaker characters as opposed to nerfing stronger characters when possible. That's obviously not always possible. And it's pretty easy to nerf Cleric. You can just tweak the numbers a bit, right? Make the lesser heal go from 15 to 10. Make the other heal, Divine Light or whatever it's called, go from 30 to 25. You can tweak numbers to balance the character pretty easily. But I want the character to stay where they are right now. I don't think they need to be nerfed. I think we should reward support players for doing their job well. So I don't know. I like where they are. Now, up next here is the Barbarian, who I play a lot of Barbarian, and I say this every time to disclose any bias here. All of the complaints I've seen about Barbarian have been like the whole, oh, barbarian is broken because when a wizard and a cleric come together and they love each other very much, they make a baby, and then barbarian kills you. And I'm sure that that is a thing. I'm sure if you watch, like, I don't know, maybe a bunch of big streamers play the game, that's like a very common occurrence, especially in like high roller dungeons. I played a lot of solo last playtest, so I'm not in a good position here to talk about this as well, I guess. But I don't know. I think that the correct answer to that, I just said before I didn't want to nerf clerics, but maybe it is to nerf the supporting options instead, because without those support options, I think the barbarian is still a very good class, but I don't think they need a nerf necessarily. I've said it before. I think Felling Axe could use maybe a little bit of a nerf. It's a pretty strong weapon when used well, but it's also it's a weapon that has decent enough counterplay options too as well. So I don't know. I don't know how you nerf the barbarian in a way that stops the things that people are complaining about the barbarian having from happening. I don't think, and if you nerf it too much, fighter just probably ends up doing the same thing. So I don't know. One thing I will say, the Francisca axe thing, that's stupid. If you've seen any videos of it, of people running around with like 400 Francisca axes in their inventory, that shit should not be possible, right? Because the big thing about it is that when you hit someone with it, they get a pretty significant slow for a bit, and it allows for follow-up throws very easily. That is absolutely stupid and should not be a thing for sure. I don't love that at all. And I could see maybe lowering max HP a little bit on the barbarian. They have a ton of HP, so I don't know. I can see that maybe being a thing too, but I don't see any like good ways of nerfing the barbarian that makes sense to me. I don't know. The perks themselves aren't that good. It's the rage movement speed combined with the haste movement speed combined with the Felling Axe having high damage and the barbarian having a fucking insane strength stat to start with, right? All of these things come together and make it so that your barbarian can come over and one-shot your ranger and no one can stop him, because as he's charging you down, you're plunking him with arrows, but the cleric is healing him at the same time, and it's just a mess. So I don't know. I don't know how to fix it. Maybe a haste nerf is fine. I don't know. Moving on. Mentioned it before, fighter. It's a little bit on the weak side. It just doesn't do that frontline role as well as the barbarian, and it kind of, I feel like in this game it shouldn't. The idea of the fighter is that it's supposed to be sort of like this martial class. It's like a jack of all trades, master of none style, while also being probably a better tank in general, just as far as just damage resistance is concerned. That ends up not often being the case though. A lot of the metal armor that fighter has negatives to magic resistance usually. So while you end up being a physical tank, you're not a great magic tank. So I don't know. It's kind of weird. Don't love that, but whatever. I mentioned it before. The movement speed penalties in general in the game, I don't love them, and I think it would make sense for maybe just that enough, right? Maybe just reducing the overall movement speed penalty on armor will put fighter in a stronger position already. I could also see maybe reverting Weapon Master back to its original iteration of just having no damage penalty. That might be fine too. I like fighters having this flexibility of being able to use like a longbow and support your ranger in ranged combat, and then switching to a melee character to fend off your other enemies like barbarians and rogues, right? I think that's fine. I think that's where people want fighters to be, and they're just not doing that very well right now. So I can see those changes maybe helping the fighter out a bit. I also would not hate seeing fighters having a tower shield at some point, right? As far as exact implementation, I don't know. Maybe just a huge shield that has close to the same coverage as a Pavis, but only in one hand, right? And then maybe when deployed, when you're using it to block, maybe you move like at like a quarter of your speed, but it fully covers your body, so you can like sort of slowly advance towards a ranger. I can see that maybe being a cool option. That would probably have a pretty high movement speed penalty on it, but that makes sense to me at least. Anyway, moving on. Rangers, no changes. I like Rangers where they are right now. I think they're in a pretty balanced spot. They're fun to play still, but they've been toned down quite a bit from where they were in the last couple playtests. I like where they are. I think we keep them here. See how it keeps playing. I see no issues. I mentioned before how Rangers in Dungeons and Dragons have spells. I don't want them to have spells. It's fine the way it is right now. No changes for Rangers. Moving on to Wizards. I think that Wizards are also in a pretty good spot right now. They're mentioned a lot as being problematic in the Barbarian, Cleric, Wizard buff ball meta, but I don't know. I don't think while haste is the most important buff that you give to your Barbarian, I still think in general Wizards aren't the issue there. Maybe you wanna reduce the move speed a little bit on haste. Maybe, I don't know. But they got gutted, I feel like, in the last playtest. Maybe I wouldn't be shocked if maybe we went back in the opposite direction and we buffed Wizards back a little bit as far as their blaster ability. Because like the splash damage nerf on Fireball, if you ask me, is pretty significant. Chain Lightning is too easy to kill yourself with. Magic Missile, just an unfun spell to use because it forces you to root yourself in place. I don't know. I wouldn't hate maybe some more damage options for Wizards. Maybe some more cantrip style spells like Zap, but not Zap because Zap is also annoying to use. Some things like that. Maybe like a Shocking Grasp where it's like a melee attack that you do with your hand that does magic damage. Things of that nature would be pretty cool. And besides that, I would like to see more utility. Wizards in Dungeons and Dragons, they often play a support role. They're not a bad supporting character, which is why I don't mind them having haste. I think it makes sense for them. They often play this sort of support buffer role. They also often play like a battlefield control like saboteur, like they put grease on the ground and like everyone trips and things like that, right? Which is really not implementable. Like you can't implement that in this game, so I don't mind that not being a part of the Wizards kit. But Wizards also have a huge spell list of like very nice and very niche often utility spells. And more so than any other spell, I would like to see Wizards have the knock spell. If you're not familiar with the spell, basically the way it works is you see a locked object, you cast knock on it, it unlocks the object. Very simple. I think that rogues having a complete monopoly over lock-picking abilities, it does give them a little bit of meta relevance there, I guess, right? You want to have a rogue in your team because you don't want the FOMO from seeing a locked chest and not being able to unlock it, right? That makes sense. But I don't like rogues being the only character that can unlock things, and it just makes sense to me that like Wizards have a literal spell in D&D that just unlocks things. Just let them have it. Why not, right? It's a cool idea, I think. Makes sense. It's other utility things you can give them too, maybe. Arcane Lock is another cool one where it magically locks things. Kind of cool if you're running away from like a angry group. You can just be like, close the door behind you. Arcane Lock. Now they have to pick the lock to get back in or whatever, and things like that'd be pretty cool. But I don't know how useful that would really be. But it'll be fun. I want Wizards to have some more utility in their spell list, and if more than anything. And that's it for Wizards. That's all I have to say about Wizards. I like the Goblin Caves. I think the Goblin Caves are pretty cool in general. I don't have too many issues with them. Mobs seem pretty well balanced, if you ask me. The map itself, it was a little confusing at first, but overall I like it. I do really like the one guaranteed escape route. If you didn't know about it, there's like a little like door on the center east side, or not center east, I guess right east. If you look at it, whatever. Anyway, there's like a little door that after a certain point in the raid it opens and you can just walk up it instead of taking an escape portal, and you can escape the dungeon that way. That's really cool and neat. I like that. I think it'd be cool if that was implemented in more maps, maybe. But I like the caves in general. What I don't like is the cave troll. Don't like the cave troll in its current implementation. When I got my one and only cave troll kill, it was like the second iteration of the cave troll where its AI was still very abusable, but the troll had health regen, which I didn't mind that much. I don't even like health regen as a mechanic. You have a very limited time in the Goblin Caves, and it's not even a guarantee that the zone will end where the cave troll is. So having this thing where like the troll regenerates his health back, I don't love that very much. I don't like it. I would prefer it to just have health and you kill it maybe. I understand that like trolls in D&D oftentimes have regenerative capabilities. So I get that, but I don't love it. I don't love it as far as the game is concerned. But anyway, my issue with the cave troll is that, like I mentioned before, my only kill was when the AI was easily manipulated. And I thought that was an intentional design choice from the developers. I thought they wanted it so, if you're not familiar with it, the cave troll has this one attack where he does this big sweep. And the sweep can either go high or it can go low. And if it goes high, you can duck under the attack. And if it goes low, you can jump over the attack. And it's telegraphed a little bit, but not very much. You don't have much time to react to it. It is reactable, but it's not easy to react. And then the issue is that I don't think I've ever survived a hit from it. I think every single character, whenever I've been hit by that big swing, I have been killed by it. Now, I imagine if you go in there with like a fighter with like 90 physical damage resistance, you'll probably survive the hit still. But I don't know. I think that's a silly mechanic. I would prefer the sweep attack to either have more predictability beforehand, in the way it was before, where previously, the previous iteration of it, if you were far away and the troll would come up and do the wide swing, if you were far away, it would always go high. And if you were close when he initiated the swing, it would always go low. That's how it used to work, but apparently that it was a bug, and it's not what the developers wanted. So they instead changed it to be pretty much a 50-50. Not literally, there is some things, like the first one is guaranteed to go low, apparently. So great, you made it past the first one, and now prepare to die in your next one, right? I don't like that. I would prefer it to be more telegraphed, so you can actually react to it and dodge accordingly. But whatever, I don't know. In its current state, you pretty much need a shield so that way you can block the wide swing, which just, I don't know. I don't like restricting certain bosses to only be being fought by certain classes. I know it's not impossible. I've seen videos of like barbarians killing the troll where they just kind of run away all the time, and like they just kind of just weave in and out of combat. I don't know. It's very weird. It's very tricky. I don't like it. I don't trust it. I would prefer that one specific move to be a little bit actually, counter playable. But anyway, whatever. Not that big of a deal. You can just choose not. You don't have to fight the troll. So whatever. It's fine. Another thing I wouldn't hate if there was a little bit more consistency to the final ring placement on the Inferno stages. Especially if you're like, it's very annoying if you go down there with the intention of trying to kill one of the bosses, and the ring just ends up not even being close. And I get that not everyone going to the Inferno wants to fight the boss. I think in a perfect world, it'd be like a near guarantee of the final couple circles having like a 75-25 ratio of like 75% of the boss is like, or of the zone is in the boss room. Another like sliver of like 25-ish% is outside of the boss room. So that way there's like, good chances of maybe like 1 or 2 portals spawning outside the room and then the rest spawning inside. I just think it's very annoying to bring in really good gear with the intent of going to fight that final boss, getting a really bad spawn in the Inferno, having to fight through like 3 centaurs or whatever, not literally, but like having to fight through all the shit to get to the center room, and then you know what, we've only got like 45 seconds before the circle makes this fight impossible. That's annoying. And I think it would just be better if the circle was closer to the center. It doesn't have to be entirely random. I believe, and don't quote me on this, but I'm not certain, I believe in PlayerUnknown's Battleground there is like some sort of not pure RNG as to where the circle goes, so that way the circle does not end up ending in like pure water. So I don't think it's too blasphemous to have maybe some more consistency with where the circle ends up in the final Inferno. I would like that, but you know, at the end of the day, whatever. It's not that big of a deal. Just don't just don't go to the Inferno, I guess, right? Whatever. Um, Now this game gets a lot of comparisons to Tarkov, rightfully so. There's a lot of similar mechanics. One thing that I just don't want to see in this game, I think it would be just kind of not good. I don't want to see an insurance system, mainly because it's very tedious. It's very annoying to have to keep gear insured and like, oh, I have to, hey, can you take my sword and drop it in the corner of this room or whatever for me? Thanks. So hopefully no one finds it, yada yada, etc. I just don't want to deal with insurance. I don't want that to be a thing, and I think it's actually kind of a healthy mechanic for the game to not have insurance. Games like this, people tend to accumulate wealth rapidly because they're a bunch of little, you know, you know, degenerates. I don't know how to describe them, but people love just stashing and hoarding equipment and stuff like that, right? Um, and I think it's not a terrible thing for you to lose some of that sometimes permanently, right? I think because also think of it this way too. If you really want to make sure that no one gets your equipment, right? You're like, oh, I had a bad run here. I didn't find any loot, and there's like 3 guys camping the last portal. You can just run deep, deep, deep into the zone, and they're not gonna get your stuff. So it's guaranteed to come back to you, basically. And I don't like that. I think it is a bad. And I'm not seeing people say like, "Oh man, I wish this game had an insurance system like Tarkov." I'm not seeing anyone say that, but I'm just being. I guess I'm gonna be the first to say I don't want to see it in this game. I don't think it would be a net positive. I think it would be just weird and bad and not good. However, one thing that Tarkov does have that I would like this game to have is a Tarkov style flea market slash auction house slash whatever you want to call it, grand exchange if you play RuneScape, whatever. I hate trying to sell items in this game. It's very annoying. The market chats are just absolutely flooded. And listen, I mentioned RuneScape before. I have very fond memories of going into the Varrock Bank and trying to buy a rune simi for like 30k or whatever, right? It's neat, it's interesting, it's cool to have this sort of like literal open marketplace of people trying to like buy and sell things. It's annoying. It's not worth it, if you ask me. I think having some sort of auction house style system, it's just easier and simpler. I just want to take my sword and put it on the auction house and go back into raid and try to play. I don't want to spend 45 minutes haggling with this Neanderthal about how my Bardiche is definitely worth 700 gold and I will not take 400 gold for it. Right? That's not where I want to be. That's not how I want to be spending my time. So I would prefer one of those systems. Now, the problem with the auction house, there's been huge rippling effects in Escape from Tarkov about the implications of this. Real money trading, things like that. It's true that that'll probably be a thing that does happen, but it already can happen with the current trading system. It doesn't alleviate that if that's a concern. So I don't know. I don't know what you do about that. Last thing I want to talk about here is dungeon level 1. People have speculated, and I think the developers in Q&As have been literally asked about what dungeon level 1 will be like. I don't care that much. It would be cool if it was outside. People have said like, hey, is it going to be outdoors? And that would be nice, but I'm not going to be upset if it's an indoor dungeon still. Like, whatever. Not that big of a deal to me. It would be cool though. It would give each layer of the dungeon a distinct feel to it. And by the way, I should actually clarify this if you don't realize. If you've been playing Dark and Darker, but you don't know this, the level we're currently playing on when we started the game is actually dungeon level 2, basement level 2, whatever you want to call it. It's the second level of the game. The Inferno is the third level, and then there's going to be a first level that we haven't even played on yet, technically. So think about that. Keep that in mind for the progression. You're going to start level 1, and then go to the current level, level 2, and then eventually go down to the Inferno, right? That's like that's the progression there. And it can be outside, it can be inside, whatever. It doesn't matter that much. I would like, I think I I think I want no escape portals in dungeon level 1. I think I want everyone to be required to go to dungeon level 2. But I'm not sure about that. Wouldn't be the end of the world if maybe there's no maybe there's no zone in dungeon level 1. Maybe it's literally outside and you can just go out of bounds in the map and then just leave. That might be kind of a cool idea. I wouldn't hate that necessarily. But I don't know. I think I would prefer dungeon level 1 having everyone required to go down. Cuz think of it this way, right? If dungeon level 1 has, let's say right now, I think lobbies have 18 players max, right? Maybe 18, 16, I forget the exact number, but they have 18 players. Think about how many people go down from dungeon level 2 to dungeon level 3. Not many, right? Not many people make it down there even if they want to go. So if we are playing on dungeon level 1, right, outside or whatever, and there's 18 players to start, and let's say just in dungeon level 1, half of them die, and you go down to these still pretty big maps in dungeon level 2 with, like, let's say 9 people, they're going to feel a lot smaller, or they're going to feel a lot bigger and a lot more empty because less people are making it down to that level. I think I want most people to be forced to go down rather than escape dungeon level 1, so that way dungeon level 2 doesn't feel so empty. But maybe dungeon level 1 will have a higher player count than it does currently. I don't know. What if it's just like if 50 players in an open field? I don't know, it could be funny. But would be interesting to think about is how the developers, how Iron Mace handles that section of it, right? I don't know. Not my job to figure out. One last thing. Where's the dragon? I think we need a dragon boss, right? The splash art for the high roller dungeon has a dragon. Where is he? So that makes sense. And here's the problem, right? Here's like the main issue with a dragon. It should be the boss, the final boss, right? Probably. But the Inferno is the final level. Inferno is the final level. Dragons, not super connected to, like, they're not super associated with being like in like the hell dimension. So maybe, I wouldn't be shocked about this. I wouldn't be surprised if eventually we see maybe the dragon is a boss on the second level, similar to how like the cave troll is a boss in the goblin caves. Maybe the dragon will be a consistent boss that you can find on dungeon level 2. That will be somewhat out of the way, so you're never forced to really fight him if you don't want to. But it makes sense because, like, I think it's like the Forgotten Castle or something. Makes dragon in a castle. That's fine. Shrek did it. Dark and Darker can do it as well. So I like the idea of dragon being dungeon level 2 boss that is not mandatory. It's sectioned off in its own little separate arena, similar to how the cave troll is. And then keep the dungeon level 3 bosses the way they are, because they make sense for the Inferno, right? Lich King, Ghost King, or whatever, right? They belong down there. They can be in the Hell Zone. I don't want to see Dragon in the Hell Zone. I want him to be a separate boss. And yeah, that's it. That's all my really hopefully good ideas. Would be neat if any and all of these were added. I think most of these are good ideas, but you know, hey, that's your job as the viewer here. If you have other cool ideas, leave a comment. I'd love to hear them. If you think I'm a moron, I would prefer you be maybe a little bit more polite about it. But tell me what you disagree with too. I'd love to hear people's ideas about the game. It's like talking about the game. It's really good. It's a really fun game. Probably a little early to say, especially because it doesn't even exist as a real game yet. But it's probably going to be my game of the year right now. So, yeah. Have a good one. Thanks for watching. Maybe consider subscribing. It'll be a while probably before I do any Dark and Darker content. Because I don't know what else I would do between now and the next playtest. But, yeah. Goodbye.